Namaskar, welcome back. Viewers, Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sharma recently said that the population of Assam will be 50% of Muslims by 2041. Now, why is that a problem? Because a very small, negligible number of that population will be the Assamese, the ethnic Muslims of the state. The larger chunk, or a very big chunk of the population, is because of infiltration that has been going on from Bangladesh over the last few decades. Earlier, Supreme Court had said that the scale of infiltration into our country is as serious as an external aggression. Recently, Government of India has ordered a massive drive to flush out illegal Bangladeshis, Rohingyas and other infiltrators and to have them identified and deported. How successful has been the drive so far? What are the challenges that the governments are facing in effecting this drive? And most importantly, why are some senior people opposing this move? All that on Media Scan this weekend. So with this report, which gives you an idea of what's going on in the country, let me connect straight to my guests for this evening. I have with me Rami Desai, well-known scholar and expert on the sector of Bangladesh, Myanmar and all related issues. Welcome Rami Desai, namaskar.
Namaskar, Smita. It's a privilege to be on your show.
Also joining me here in the DD studios, Abhinav Pandya. You have been listening to him on Media Scan on earlier occasions. An expert on the geopolitical scenario, especially in this subcontinent, and issues of radicalization and communalization. Namaskar, Abhinav Pandya, welcome back.
Namaskar. Thank you.
Rami Desai, if I may come to you first. We all remember that famous observation by the Supreme Court, where the bench had said that the scale of illegal immigration into India, especially in the eastern sector, is so large that it is akin to an external aggression. Now, keeping that observation in mind, how do you look at the recent drive that has been launched under the orders of the MHA? And do you think enough has been done in the past few weeks to make it a success?
Smita, that's a good question because this has been on our minds for a really long time. You know, the illegal immigration that we have seen coming through our northeastern borders has deep implications. Of course, it has implications on security, but also demography and cultural ethnic relationships in these regions. Assam being a major case study of how within a couple of decades we've seen a massive shift in demography in the state. Now, one of the problems of this region is, of course, the porous borders. You know, these are very, very difficult borders to completely plug in. The terrain is difficult. You know, these are very large borders. So it is difficult to completely plug the borders, but still action needs to be taken. And I think there have been many years post-independence where we let the Northeast be to itself without really paying any great focus on what was happening there. But the drive is a welcome move. However, we must be realistic. When infiltration happens, it doesn't just impact the northeastern states. There is a lot of infiltration that disperses across the country. Now, to be able to identify these illegal immigrants in totality is going to be very difficult, because we know that documents have been procured, they have sort of immersed themselves into the larger population, and it poses a huge danger to us in terms of, as you know, Smita, very well, security. Since we have seen the instability and the volatility in Bangladesh grow, within the first month of the regime change in Bangladesh, we got over 26 26 operatives of Ansarullah Bangla team, a terrorist group in Bangladesh, in Assam. So that's how quick they react to situations. So to answer your question in short, I'll say these drives are very welcome, and I think we need to enhance them, and we need to do an all India drive, and we need to take even bigger steps to be able to identify illegal immigrants. However, we are also in a very precarious position.
Yes, so we'll come back to those points again, but allow me to bring in Dr. Pandya here. Abhinav Pandya, there are two aspects, of this illegal influx that we have been going through, facing for decades. One is the threat to national security it poses, and the second is the pressure, the drain on our resources. On both the counts, how do you look at this challenge? And more importantly, have you been able to assess the recent drive that has been initiated? What do you think about it?
Thank you very much, Smita ji. I think this is a major challenge that India faces today in terms of national security. First, I would like to situate this entire problem in a larger framework. So there are inimical forces, particularly coming from the radical Islamist segments, and they have this idea of Ghazwa-e-Hind. So Ghazwa-e-Hind is a much broader, larger concept. The main pillar of Ghazwa-e-Hind is demographic jihad. That's how you conquer this country.
No, 1 second. Are you trying to say that those people who have infiltrated into our country are not coming here because of poverty, because of lack of employment, to find a better life, but rather with the intent of kind of conquering our country?
Well, let me tell you, these are very nuanced things. Definitely economic reasons are there, conditions of squalor and poverty are there, and human trafficking gangs are working. But there is a much larger agency, much larger forces which are working at a much larger level. And those are radical Islamist organizations, with global networks. And this idea of Ghazwa-e-Hind is something which is very dominant in their mindset when it comes to India. As a part of that, demographic jihad is the most, I would say, potent and effective way of implementing Ghazwa-e-Hind. I mean, it's much more powerful than your other instruments like terrorism, etc., running proxy organizations. If you are able to manage, or if you are able to completely change the demographic composition of this country, then I think that's the best and the most effective way to achieve Ghazwa-e-Hind. Now, as a part of that, this illegal immigration of particularly Muslim migrants from the neighboring countries, from Bangladesh, it kind of constitutes a central pillar of this strategy. Now, I'd like to say, mention briefly about the dangers that they pose. Definitely, they are a drain on economic resources, and I mean, they take away the resources from government schemes and all. But they are the issues. I'm mostly concerned about the security aspect of that. And in terms of security, it's a major threat. First of all, it's an attack on your civilization. It's an attack on your civilizational values and ethos, and you can compare this situation to what's happening in Europe right now. The refugee invasion in Europe, and it's visible in many European countries. You can see that they are capturing institutions. In UK, most of the mayors now, most of the mayors are now Muslim mayors. And there are mayors who are directly supporting Al Qaeda, who have fought cases in the past for Al Qaeda. In New York City, you have someone like Mamdani, who has never been shy of expressing his sympathies towards these Islamist organizations. You have senators like Ilhan Omar, who have never shied away from nurturing ties with the global Islamist groups. You have communities from Somalia, Lebanese groups, who have maintained ties with the terror organizations across the world. Likewise, these illegal immigrants in India spreading across the country, they can facilitate all kinds of anti-India activities. Sleeper cells are running in those groups, and even in Bangladesh, groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Ansarullah Bangla, they have deep penetration among these groups, so their handlers are recruiting people from them, and whenever they are coming to India, these are very orchestrated moves basically, and those handlers stay in touch with some of the main coordinators here, and these people can facilitate terror financing here, they can facilitate the sheltering of terrorists who are coming to India, they can facilitate movement of weapons, and they can also facilitate the propaganda and information war. When suppose, for example, the anti-India forces, they hire some human rights organizations or let's say media group, then you have a ready supply of this fodder who is going to cry and tell their sob stories that we are getting oppressed and all. And once you start the drive, again, this is going to foment unrest in India because the Indian Muslims are most likely to perceive this as something which is anti-Islam and anti-Muslim community.
Let me take
the last part, whenever there is a riot in a city, and today in the world of artificial intelligence, social media, it's very easy for foreign forces to orchestrate a massive riot in the countries. And in those riots, 200-300 people can die at a short notice. So these forces, these illegal immigrants can join the forces, can join the rioters, and they can wreak havoc.
Let me take this to Rami Desai also. And just since you mentioned Abhinav Pandey, I am reminded that there were a couple of incidents of violence in Maharashtra where it was found that the violence was fomented because, AI generated and deepfake videos had been circulated and amplified from people sitting in Bangladesh. So that is something that you have just mentioned. But as you were saying, there are people sitting in European countries. We do not have to go that far. We have activists sitting here in our country who have gone to, as far as the Supreme Court to say that Rohingyas and Bangladeshi immigrants who are here, we should adopt a humanitarian attitude towards them and provide them with all basic facilities because they have nowhere to go back. In this situation, Rami Desai, how do you think we can tackle what the court itself has called an external aggression?
Smita, see, with the situation of Rohingyas that we see sitting on our borders, they're in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, on the Tombru border, Rohingyas are being weaponized, not for the first time, but they have always been weaponized. I do some amount of archival studies as well, and there are letters that I have found of the first IB chief writing to Sardar Patel saying that at that point they used to be called the Arakan Muslims, are being trained by ISI to launch an attack on India whenever need be, because Pakistan always had this idea that they wanted Tripura also to come to them. There has been this massive radicalization that has gone on with the Rohingyas in these camps. Now, apart from the radicalization, we must also realize that they're involved in drugs, they're involved in trafficking, they're involved in all sorts of illicit activities. However, the media management has been such that they are more seen as refugees than as a threat by the larger international community.
Who is managing the media?
The Rohingyas have a great outreach program. And let me tell you, ISI also is very well established that they are very well involved in this. We have seen this year the emergence of the Four Brotherhood Alliance come up, which is a grouping of the 4 militant Rohingya groups in Bangladesh, which they say is a proxy brotherhood that is being managed by the ISI. Also, you have countries like Turkey, you have countries like Qatar, who look at the Rohingyas as a refugee population that needs immediate humanitarian intervention. There is a lot of money that is coming in to these camps. There have been visits by not just Mr. Erdogan's wife, but also a very high-level Qatari delegation led by the princess to these Rohingya camps. So there is this sort of...
So Ms. Desai, you are trying to tell us that there is this entire Solidarity Alliance worldwide which is trying to project the Rohingyas as a community that has been wronged, and they should be facilitated wherever they go, particularly
Absolutely.
India.
And let me point out the hypocrisy of it.
Yes.
While they are being seen as a humanitarian crisis and that they should they should be accommodated in other countries. And this is being spearheaded by the West as well. If you remember, when Yunus took on the interim government, the first trip when he went to the US with his advisors from the Islamic Chhatra Shibir, one of their agenda points of discussion with the Biden government was the rehabilitation of the Rohingyas. So, the West has coveted this idea a lot, but they refuse to take the Rohingyas. So for them, it should be Bangladesh and the neighborhood countries that should give some amount of refuge to the Rohingyas, but they don't want to take any responsibility for it. Now, coming to the security part of this, we already know there has been enough infiltration by this community in the country. And I think it was our Home Minister who made a very forceful and a very powerful statement in the Parliament saying that not today, not tomorrow, are they ever going to be given any sort of status in India because they pose a threat? Because there is a historical context. In 2017, it was the Rohingyas in Myanmar that orchestrated the massacre of 99 Hindu women and children. It is the massacre is called the Khamensak massacre. So, they have this anti-India sort of sentiment, which is weaponized by anti-India groups like ISI and other Islamic groups. So therefore, I think our governments have to have a very clear agenda on what needs to be done. I think the population, the Indian community needs to come together. We need to come together and say we don't want them. But like you correctly pointed out, Smita, that we'll always have some activists within our own country who will want to be their voice. And we've seen recently Supreme Court shut down Colin Gonsalves and team, who were trying to rehabilitate some Rohingyas in India. And we saw the Supreme Court say that was done without evidence. So I think
but isn't it also a fact that while we have some activists and non-profit organizations who, advocate for these people and to adopt a more humanitarian attitude, it is also a truth that there are people sitting in constitutional positions in our country who have also not shown any interest in the identification or deportation of these elements. In fact, they have been facilitated under their guard. And Abhinav Pandya, if I may come to you, Mamata Banerjee has very vociferously opposed this move. And we are seeing statements from her side almost every day where she is saying that this drive is actually an excuse to harass and to target people speaking in the Bengali language. She has mentioned various drives. Now, it is possible that because the language is the same, some people for reasons of examination, for verification, may have been picked up. But as we saw in Gurugram and even in the NCR region, when it was verified, their antecedents were clear, they were let off, and only those whose antecedents could not be established were deported. How do you look at this very aggressive opposition from Mamata Banerjee, even from other people who are saying that this drive should be put to a stop?
Well, there are multiple reasons for this. Well, I think definitely they constitute a vote bank, and these parties have taken a certain ideological position, and that mostly circulates around the appeasement of minority extremism.
No. What is the ideology in helping and facilitating an infiltrator? He or she is a foreigner.
It's more about the vote bank. It's more about getting political gains out of it. But besides that, I should say that this is not just what it appears.
Okay.
There is a massive penetration of global Islamist forces and anti-India forces, and that includes a cabal of intelligence agencies, the global Islamist charities, the global Islamist organizations in India, among the political groupings, and also in the various, in the government also, I must say. I should be rather very blunt and honest to mention that, that this penetration in various institutions of the government and also among the political groups is very strong. You can see that some of these human rights groups and these organizations, they hardly talk about the rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits in Jammu and Kashmir.
Right.
But you will be shocked to know that you will find Rohingyas in Jammu, you will find Rohingyas in Kashmir Valley, as far as places like Kargil, which are completely shut off for the country for at least 6 months in a year. So there's this global
and they have
network.
no, I mean, they are not contiguous with the eastern border. They are thousands of miles away.
Yes, these are very strategic designs. See, they want to bring them, settle them in strategic areas, so that when there is a war-like situation, you can use them as your assets. I'll just give one example. If you go to Jammu, around the entire city of Jammu, they have brought very radical Muslims from Kashmir Valley. The local administrators, including the local SDMs, Tehsildars, gave them the registrations and pattas and the land documents very easily. Now they have formed a complete fence around the Jammu city. In case of an invasion from Pakistan, they can act as a second line of attack against India.
Yes.
Likewise,
From
some
within.
of these illegal immigrants which are being made to settle in different parts of the country in strategic locations, they can block the movement of forces, paramilitary forces, they can foment unrest, and they can create real hassles and difficulties for India. And as my co-panelist Rami rightly pointed out that there are global forces, like anti-India countries like Turkey and Qatar, working for to pursue this agenda, which is absolutely right. I have worked on Qatar's particular
role.
Qatar's role in radicalization in India, and also supporting various Salafist organizations in India. And there are countries like Turkey also, which have been very overt in anti-India propaganda and anti-India activities, supporting Pakistan. So I think we have to understand this problem, first of all, as something which is much larger in nature. Let's say it's like a civilizational war against India. And then also look at the involvement of global actors. It is not just a simple human trafficking refugee problem.
Yes, and Rami Desai, while we are speaking of political forces which have opposed this drive, I recently saw a statement by Mr. Owaisi, and another leader from his party, Mamata Banerjee, has been speaking almost every day, questioning the move. But there is another very interesting exercise going on in the country, which is also related to flushing out infiltrators and people who have settled in our country and have tried to, get amalgamated in the population. Now, this special intensive revision of voters, which is not limited to infiltrators, but it is believed to go a long way in being able to identify them and at least disenfranchise them so that they do not influence the political future of the country. But again, there is strong opposition to it. Parliament has not functioned for an entire week against the SIR, and we have senior leaders like Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee and all opposition leaders saying that the SIR must be scrapped. If such is the attitude towards any effort that is made to flush out this aggression, how do you think we can ever achieve any modicum of success in this?
Absolutely. It's a very bleak future because clearly politics comes before the nation for a lot of politicians and for a lot of political parties. Number two, I also think that there is this sort of need to come together on any issue, given that it is a Prime Minister Modi-led initiative. So political parties feel that this is a way that you can corner the government that is a very popular government and a government that has always put national security as a priority.
Yes.
Now, people like Mamata Banerjee, Smita, with all due respect, to a female politician. But having said that, her state is in shambles, whether it is the economy, whether it is infiltration, whether it is riots, whether it is law and order situation, whether it is security of women. It is in shambles. So I don't think she has
and people making bombs in Murshidabad and Malda, and now even North 24 Parganas are being caught every day.
Absolutely. So what is their moral standing to counter or to oppose a move like this? On the contrary, they should be supporting it because their state and the people of their state need it the most. However, this is how they stay in power. And I think she has been exposed not once, but many times. However, the situation now in terms of demographic change in West Bengal is so dire that we will see people like her, if we don't see the larger picture, we will see people like her wield more power. Assam, should learn from the mistakes that have been made in West Bengal. And I think it does, and it recognizes that, and therefore, it is making sincere efforts. But unless all political parties, irrespective of their ideology or vote banks, decide to come on board and really look at this as a security situation for India and support these moves of the government, I see the future as being bleak for the success of initiatives like this.
And is it not a fact that now even Mamata Banerjee's own party, the TMC's leaders, have started feeling the pressure of these people who have their roots back in Bangladesh, because they have now started calling the shots on certain occasions? But very quickly, we have very little time left. Abhinav Pandya, is it a fact that for some people, their political interests and narrow political vision comes much before national security, and that is why we are seeing such a clear division in terms of this drive against flushing out these infiltrators, and also in the SIR related to the voters list?
Of course, for some people, for some parties and organizations, the political interests matter much more. And in fact, this is the reason that before 2014, this problem strengthened, intensified, and no one paid in attention. What you are seeing now is the result of the illegal infiltration for over 4 to 5 decades. And all that happened because the political masters wanted that to happen, because somehow they were hands in glove with all these things, with these organizations. And now today we are facing the heat. So definitely political interests matter more for such people. And regarding the success of this initiative, I would like to point out that since this problem is the result of the 4 to 5 decades of illegal infiltration, merely drive of 2 months cannot really result in any effective success. But still, we must congratulate and we must thank and praise Prime Minister Modi's efforts to take this initiative and to at least start something. Okay.
Right.
But then what you need now, right now, is to identify those people, those police officers, intelligence officers who facilitated or who allowed this illegal infiltration. Also the administrative officers. You have to treat them very harshly. You have to initiate inquiries against them.
Maybe just identifying and deporting these infiltrators is not enough. We must also identify and perhaps penalize those elements who have facilitated this infiltration over the decades. But I am afraid, panelists, that's all the time we had on Media Scan this weekend. Thank you very much, Rami Desai and Abhinav Pandya, for coming here and sharing this very complex issue with us in such a short span of time. Thank you once again. So, as our experts have just pointed out, just a few months' drive will not suffice to tackle this huge aggression that has been going on over at least 5 to 6 decades. What is required is a long, sustained campaign, and just half a dozen state governments taking it seriously will not do. Unfortunately, there are political parties and powers within the country who are not interested in helping in the drive. More on that in a later episode. For now, it's a wrap-up on Media Scan this weekend. Do join us next weekend. Namaskar.